Okay, welcome to everyone watching us live. Chris will be letting additional speakers into the meeting, I believe. But first, I should mention that the board met in executive session to consider matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or persons, proposed, pending, or current litigation, and collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, known as the Taylor Law. We will now begin our public meeting with the pledge. Our superintendent, Dr. Giarrizzo, has a flag in the background. So we will all stand and do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, under God, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I recognize that's hard. People are coming into a meeting and halfway through, people are getting up, getting down. Everyone obviously is respectful to pledge, but we're also figuring out how to Google Meet as well. I will move on again as our speakers get online here for action item 2, approval of the minutes from our December 17th, 2020 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Thank you, Andrea. Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor of approval of the December 17th minutes, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We now move on to the report from our superintendent, Dr. Giarrizzo.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Believe it or not, I looked at this before and I said it and calculated it's only been 7 work days since our last board meeting, even though it's been almost a month since we've been together. So so that is just for some perspective on where things are at. Happy holidays and happy new year to everybody. Welcome to our principals and directors. It's really nice to see you all. Just a couple of quick things to update the board on since we've been back. We've had a pretty smooth opening. We're following our COVID protocols pretty rigidly. Windows are open, masks are on, social distancing is in place. We are, so far over the course of the week, we have seen a couple of cases uptick. We might be seeing some of the results of holiday gatherings, but the numbers have been manageable at this point. I would say, I had a conversation with Glenwood Landing today. We are a little concerned about some of the staffing over there, but we're hanging in for now. Thank you to Bridget Finder, who I think I just saw come up here. For putting all that work into making it all come together. So that is good. John Hall just collected our 3rd round of CO2 readings. They are happening, I think, today and tomorrow. We'll start taking a look at the trend information to see where we've been targeting and making progress. I was looking at the high school data today. It looks really good with some good improvements. So we did that. I am excited to report that all of our schools are in good standing with New York State and all of our subgroups. That's always very positive. I'm also very excited to share that that North Shore High School has been invited to apply for a blue ribbon for application, which is a pretty significant accomplishment. We're one of 19 schools in the entire state who have been invited to apply. So that is a major honor. We'll get that information out. Good work. Yes, Julie. At our last meeting, we talked about where our live streaming efforts were coming along at the high school. And I want to thank Chris Zublionis and Eric Contreras for working with the teachers on this. We're working towards identifying 2 subject areas that will roll out between the first week of the new quarter, or more likely the first week in February. We have to order some technology. We're working on staff development with teachers, making sure that they are equipped to make this happen in an instructionally sound way. Mr. Contreras will be getting some feedback from students as well, because the model is going to change. And we want to make sure that our students are comfortable with the direction that we're proposing to go. And then we'll take the next steps from there. And then last but not least, I do want to offer our very excited congratulations to Lucia Martin and Kate Wesley Jones, who tomorrow, when you see Newsday, you will see that they are named one of the top 300 scholars in the Regeneron Science Talent Search this year, which for our little high school is pretty extraordinary. So congratulations, and to mom and daughter as well. So a huge accomplishment, and we wish both women a lot of luck as they move forward in the competition. And hopefully from that 300, they'll be identified as one of the 40 that travels to Washington. So that's they have really interesting topics. I'm excited to see them move forward. Okay, and with that, I will. That concludes my report for this evening. I'll turn it back over to you, Dave.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
You're very welcome.
We are very lucky tonight to move on to our next report, which is from our student government representatives. Ariadne and Michael, take it away.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Thank you. So the SGO, we've been working to reach out to the entire student body, and we're trying to look for more ways to improve, school spirit and involvement. Our main goal is we want to kind of boost morale right now, because everything's seeming, kind of glum with everything, and kids are really stressed out, especially seniors with college and stuff. So we want to kind of brighten the school environment a little bit. So one way that we're trying to do that is we're trying to coordinate a winter spirit week. We're coming up with ideas for the days right now, but we wanted to have, a little something extra that people can look forward to. We're also connecting with the counseling department on getting the word out about the upcoming student forums, where students can give feedback about, how the school year is going. We also are spreading the word about the upcoming senior play. Auditions were actually just held today, and I think tomorrow virtually. And we're just trying to get people on board with participating this year, despite the virtual format and everything. And some other exciting stuff that I'll let Ariadne take it away.
Hi, so like Michael said, our main goal is to kind of boost student engagement and morale, because it has been tough this year. So we're planning on organizing some school-wide activities and like crafts. So what we're working on right now is getting like students and teachers to decorate their classroom doors, or kind of do like a project that can get a whole classroom involved and kind of get students excited, but obviously in a socially distant way. We're also brainstorming like holiday celebrations like Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day, just something to kind of brighten up the school a little bit. And my favorite project that we're working on right now is organizing a virtual alumni assembly with last year's graduates. So we're working with the counseling department to reach out to those students, so we can kind of ease people's minds about college, since it is super stressful. And I'm assuming for the juniors, it's going to be difficult not really knowing what's going to happen next year. So we have a lot of good things going on, and I'm really excited to get started.
That is great. I'm glad to hear you're working with the counseling department, because I know that getting information and feedback from those grads is something that is always very valuable, but it's often hard to do. However, in most cases, like everyone else, they're going to be attached to one of these devices. So hopefully we can grab them. Dan, you can get the information you need from them and give some good feedback to our kids, because in any year, college choice and stress is difficult. But this year and last year, it's been exponentially more so. So we really appreciate that. And appreciate both of you coming tonight and sharing what's going on at the schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. With that, we will move on to our first discussion item of the night, which is our district report on student achievement. I am going to unclick my mic and let Doctors Girizzo and Zublionis take it away.
Thank you. So welcome to our team. Chris, thank you for leading this work. I'm not going to say much other than these are strange times to be looking at all of this data and reentry and regression reports. So I'm going to turn this over to Chris. Let him. You have a video, yes?
Yes, same
Okay.
format as the 17th.
Same format. Okay, so we're going to watch a video and then we'll have an open discussion about the data that exists, and we have our directors and our principals here to speak with you all. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Girizzo.
You're welcome, Chris. Thank you
And
very much.
Thank you, board members, and for the time to speak about student achievement, which, as Dr. G said, means something so different this year. And while I helped to organize and synthesize the report information that you received, I really have to give the credit to our directors and principals. So I want to welcome them, Ms. Small, our Director of Elementary Humanities, Ms. Julie Ritter, our Director of Secondary English, Mr. Lang, our Director of Athletics, Physical Education and Health, Mr. Doherty, our Director of Counseling, Ms. Anna Aguiar, our Director of E&L and World Languages, Dr. Titone, our teacher leader for AP and IB, Mr. Marino, our Director of Special Ed, Mr. Kissinger, our Secondary Assistant Director for Special Ed, and our principals, Ms. Finder, Dr. Rufa, Ms. Wojcik, Mr. Contreras, and Mr. Dennis. So thank you all for being here, team. I just wanted to give a very quick overview before we start our video. This evening, we'll speak to you about world languages, the humanities, and we also have some information for you on wellness and physical education and health. Now, we will speak to you more about those latter subjects later on in the year. There's a presentation on engagement and wellness in May. So like our last report on the 17th, we tried to use 4 lenses to synthesize all this information and to make sense of it all. We looked at learning loss that we measured at the end of last school year. And like with the STEM report, we saw positive results, but uneven participation. And of course, students left the school year and ventured into a very diverse set of experiences in the summer. Some had tutoring, some had our summer program, some had no programs. And so as students entered in September, we had even more diversity. And that, of course, necessitated that we do some diagnostic work, and that took many forms. We had some formal diagnostics. At the elementary level, we used our benchmark assessments to start. We will be using the STAR assessment for reading in a couple of weeks, but we chose to start with the benchmarks because that provides the most useful data for teachers right off the bat. They sit with students, they read with them. And our Ms. Ritter used the STAR for our middle school literacy diagnostics. Diagnostics in the other subject areas took many forms, in the forms of pre-unit assessments that were teacher created, department created, but also, we asked teachers what they saw. We got that qualitative information from our teachers and their direct observations of students. I will say that a lot of the data that you saw that was more formal diagnostic data was taken a few weeks into the school year. So we do expect that when we do our second benchmark and our second STAR administration for the middle school and our first STAR administration for the elementary school, it will be we'll see a lot of growth from this initial data. But that being said, we had 70% of our elementary students performing near or at benchmark and 80% of our middle school students. So that's a good start. Clearly, we do have work to do. We did see regression in the world languages and social studies, mostly in skills, but also an important, interesting trend is in confidence and in behaviors of learning that students definitely were not practicing as much during the closure and over the summer. One thing that's interesting about the closure is not only that was it harder, did we have more challenges, but a lot of the resources and tools and strategies we would normally use to deal with those issues, with those challenges and those gaps, those were hampered. For example, because of wearing masks and using desk shields and the need to socially distance, we couldn't do small group instruction like we normally would. So that some of our go-to tools were actually hampered in addition to the challenge itself. That being said, we're proud of more of our traditional achievements. We've had participation in events such as athletics. We had our intramural program in the fall, and that's continuing into the winter. We had a virtual National History Day competitions. We had 33 Seal of Biliteracy candidates in our world languages. So we had a lot of standard achievement in the humanities and world languages continue. Also, while we did talk about this at our last meeting, admittedly, the AP exams and the IP exams took a very different, drastically modified form, relatively speaking, to the other schools in our region who took those same exams. Again, very different, but relatively speaking, we performed at a higher index level than a lot of our neighbors. So our growth in that area continues. Again, different measure, but we do see some strengths there. So I do want to say that, the good news is that our students continue to achieve above national and regional norms, and we're already starting to see growth. I think we've always said at North Shore that we're in the movement business, that our small class sizes, even more so this year because of the cohorting, and the desire of our teachers who have worked so hard. And we have to take a moment to thank them for their Herculean efforts as the buffers, as the inspirers, as the innovators throughout this whole process. They're, we're creating, we're innovating, on one level, but they're doing the hard work every day. And I think we need to think of last September through now and the end of this year as one time period filled with transition, stress, strain, and learning loss. But what we want to talk about tonight, and you'll see in the video, is a hopeful message that we really do feel like most of our students, and that there will be diverse paths, but that they will end up where we want them to be. And the board asked a great question at the December 17th meeting, which I think is the essential question for everything we're thinking about this year. And that is, will our students arrive back at where they would normally be had the pandemic not occurred? And I think while the journey is going to look different, it's going to be unique, it's going to be uneven and perhaps messier than usual, we believe that the innovation that the leaders here tonight and our teachers have undergone, and our new school models create a path back towards student growth and well-being, which is where we want them to be in a typical year, despite those challenges. Having to walk this path in the best interest of our students has actually brought us closer to our strategic plan goals and required us to adopt much more quickly and rapidly some of those practices that we aspire to. We really do want to look towards more specific actions, more K-12 assessments of SBO skills. We talked about that on the 17th. Looking at writing data that we have, but we want to just correlate it and look at it more systemically. Providing more resources and space for interdisciplinary performance-based assessments. An emphasis on transfer of learning. Providing support for teachers to give highly personalized instruction. Thinking about down the road after school and summer learning opportunities. And personalized learning through instructional technology, of course, the professional learning, which we'll talk about on the 21st, to address all of this and to empower, give our teachers the space to do this work that we know that they can do. So without further ado, I'm going to ask that everybody remain muted. I am going to present what we are calling the road back to where we want our students to be.
'54th Massachusetts Regiment, breaking barriers in the Civil War. The 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first African-American regiment in the U.S. Army, was established in 1863 by Governor John Andrew. The establishment of the regiment broke racial barriers in the Union Army. Their success during the battles of Grimbal's Landing on James Island and the attack on Fort Wagner paved the path to over 200.
This is Frank Lloyd Wright. He is remembered as America's most famous and influential architect.
He's 88-year-old Frank Lloyd Wright, perhaps the greatest architect of the 20th century.
Throughout his 70-year-long career, he designed and built more than 500 structures, which changed the face of architecture and ushered in a new chapter in American.
For example, another example, in the beginning of the year, I hated reading. No one will reading so much. It's one of my hobbies and favorite things to do, and every extra on the list. And my favorite person at the beginning of the year, the person said, "Living will change. I'm gonna like it." And I thought, it's not gonna change at all. But it really did change.
Okay, so this is my IB Learner Profile conference. And this quarter, I've really tried to work on being a risk taker. And, you know, sometimes people can have like different perceptions of like a risk taker, whether it's like in sports, you know, trying a new sport or, you know, participating in class for the first time. And I really thought that like,
Madison Drala. Mi cumpleaños es el 14 de agosto del 2007. Yo tengo 13 años y en mi familia yo tengo 3 hermanas menores, una madre, un padre y un gato. Mi escuela primaria es Dutch Lane en Hicksville, Nueva York. Me amo jugar softball y practicar con mi equipo. Yo vivo en una casa con mi familia en Glen Head, Nueva York. Me encanta aprender español porque todas mi familia saben español y yo nunca entiendo las conversations. Me encanta dibujar cuando tengo tiempo después de las clases y durante la cuarentena puedo dormir tarde sin preocuparme por la escuela.
早上好，你哪儿不舒服？
我很累了，我头痛，我嗓子痛。他咳嗽了，他的喷嚏了，他发烧了。
你昨天做什么？
我做跑步。他很冷。
你有外衣吗？
没有。他不知道我有买。
The book Other Words for Home by Jasmine Warga. So the main character of this book, her name's Jude, and some of her character traits is she's brave and warm-hearted. And she's brave because she moved to America from Syria, and she had to go to a whole new different school with brand new people, and she didn't even know how to speak English, and that was really brave of her to step into this new school. And she's really warm-hearted because in Syria she left her one of her best friends, and she wrote letters to her every day because she cared about her so much. And I believe that she's a really likable character because she's Brett Cowan from the Hip Hop Hipsters, and the book I read was The Trials of Apollo, the Tyrant's Tomb by Rick Riordan. It is a fantasy book with the main character, Apollo. Apollo used to be selfish and rude, but now he's kind and understanding. In the book, Apollo looks back at the days when he was a god, and understands that they were wrong. He is now kinder to everyone. In this book, Apollo is trying to stop two emperors from destroying Camp Jupiter. I love the story and the build-up in this book. I think the theme of this book is to appreciate what you have.
So I want to thank our directors who provided all of the information and the slides and the artifacts for the video and the report, and our principals for making all of this possible and working as a team with the curriculum team. We are here now to answer your questions. So thank you.
Chris, thank you so much. Of course, thank you to all the directors, the principals, both for preparing this and for being here tonight. Obviously, everyone worked all day, and yet here we all are, and I appreciate that. Trustees, don't be shy. If you have questions, let's your comments or thoughts, please come and share them.
Thank you so much for putting that video together. It's always so nice to see pictures of the children and their work. There were a few things from the written report that I wanted to ask about. One being, and I believe it was in the literacy section, that some of the teachers had commented that they felt that there was a real loss of authentic learning this year because of the lack of field trips. And I was hoping maybe we could have a little bit of a discussion on that to figure out whether it would be possible for a cohort to travel on a bus to maybe do an outdoor field trip. Many museums are actually doing field trips for classes, some virtual, but also some in person. There are also lots of outdoor spaces like the Waterfront Center and different kinds of garden type areas on Long Island that could be used. So I was wondering if we've considered any of that.
I'll start and then I'll let others chime in. I think the report and what you said, Andrea, it really speaks to. I think folks were shying away from that at first and unsure of what the protocols were and how that would all work, given how we had anxiety about how we were going to do business here. But I think it's certainly something that we can begin to look into. Especially the local, like you mentioned, the Waterfront Center, Garvey's Point. We have a lot of great sites that are close that might be easier to start with. I'm not sure if anybody else would want to chime in on that, but feel free.
Hi, it's Jeanette Wojcik. How are you?
Good. Hi.
Good. I just wanted to share that that's been something that some of the teachers at Seacliff and I have been discussing, specifically with what Dr. Zubliona said about Garvey's Point. And it's something, that they're not losing sight of, and something that I think that we're trying to navigate some of the protocols around, and as the weather gets better in the spring, to see if this is a viable option. So it's definitely in the forefront of our minds and things as we plan moving forward.
Hi, this is Dr. Rufa. I just want to add on that even at the beginning of the year, one of the more important units for our second grade at Glen Head is their walk around their community to understand that. So we did have that happen. And similarly, I'm definitely open as we come to the spring looking at opportunities for kids. I think it's really important for them to get out into the community. And, we have such a gorgeous region. I definitely think we need to capitalize on some of our natural habitat right around us.
Sure, and maybe even in the meantime, there's so many guest speakers around the world that can come into a classroom that you wouldn't normally have access to, right? So in many ways, we're almost freer to expose the children to so many wonderful things. So I hope that the teachers and the administrators are really encouraging everyone to take advantage of those virtual opportunities.
I just wanted to add there that Miss Kingsley actually had a speaker in Miss Ebert's remote classroom yesterday, and she wrote us, Miss Ebert, just so excited about it, to your point. So I think and we're seeing that with meetings and our committee meetings. This actually opens up more possibilities through technology.
Great. The other thing that struck me from the report and just from my own daughter, the idea that because of the seats are socially distanced and the plexiglass barriers, that a lot of the young children are finding it difficult to do desk work that requires looking at the smart boards. And I know we sort of talked about this when we toured the buildings in the beginning of the year. now that we have the HEPA filters, I'm wondering whether the plexiglass barriers can even interfere with that airflow. The middle school and the high school aren't using the plexiglass barriers. So I guess I just wanted to raise the question to see whether we wanted to reconsider the use of them. I don't know what the answer is, but I am concerned if the children can't see the board well.
I can just speak for Glen Head in that, when teachers have come to me with that concern, we've worked on reconfiguring the room to maintain the social distancing. In a couple of instances, we've also been able to work with our technology department to actually get a second smart board. We found that in a number of instances as well, while the mounted wall smart boards are great, they're mounted to a wall. So it's hard to make the adjustments. So we've been able to, and in a couple of classrooms that needed them, leverage the portable smartboard instead, which has also helped the children.
This is Eric at the high school, and I just want to go back to the first point. I like the idea of, we have discussed trips at the high school as well, and due to concerns around safety and travel, we haven't, but as we move into the spring, one of the thoughts that just came to mind as you spoke was the life science classes, the environmental science, the bio classes, particularly trips that might be appropriate for outdoor learning, that are waterfront trips, to the point addressed before, that fit the curriculum. So I will bring that back for a discussion with Steve Minshall tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And the last question I was just going to ask about was the intramural programs that we have in place have been so well received by the students. And I was curious whether we could consider doing something like that at the elementary level, in part because the elementary school children have not been doing play dates and they've been very impacted and isolated at home. So if we could incorporate something like that for the younger children, I think that might really help with their social emotional development and their physical development. So I wanted to point that out. And I also wanted to recognize the teachers who've been doing the physical education program virtually, that I've been very, very impressed with how well it's been done. So I didn't want to forget about them.
Dr. McCarry, I just wanted to say, we have the template for that from the summer, because of the board's support in creating that program. In a lot of ways, that's what it was. And so I think we could, with the right conditions and resource, adult support monitoring, I think we could look into something like that. Yeah.
Because what's happening is the young children are coming home and they're just on the iPads all day communicating with each other. And, it's the best option to keep them safe. But if the school could do something safely for them, maybe, Monday is first grade, Tuesday is second grade, where they can kind of have a grade wide play date, I think that would be so, so great for them.
I just also wanted to comment on the notion of field trips that you had brought up a little bit ago. Actually, this is something that I just spoke about with my PTSO board members yesterday. We do want to try to figure out ways that we can bring either teams or sections of teams on trips. In the spring last year, when we were planning for the school year, we had our calendar meeting, and we knew that school would look different, certainly in the fall. So we planned purposefully to move our annual Greenkill trip that usually takes place in November in 6th grade. We tried to plan it for April. That likely won't happen. We're talking about that right now. We also we haven't gone to Washington, D.C. Yet, but we did plan that trip for 8th graders to be this April. So likely both of those trips won't happen. I am going to start speaking with some of the 6th grade team leaders to see, could we do something, on a smaller scale, not overnight, but do some sort of outdoor project adventure-based learning when it gets a little nicer out.
Thank you.
There's
Thank
that. There might be some opportunities, Rob, out in what's the that park called? I'm forgetting. Out on Lloyd Neck.
ComSet?
ComSet.
Yep, that's it. They have good programs for middle school kids.
Marion?
Could Mr. Contreras give the community an update on where we are for the change in the asynchronous days to synchronous days, please? Thank you.
Yes. So, can you hear me? Yeah. So we are. I met with the staff and discussed the shift and the discussion, and they were receptive, but wanted to make sure that we had the proper training for such a shift, in that there are changes to the instructional model and what instruction looks like when it's asynchronous, so that there is a camera in the room that the students at home can watch, but we have to compensate for the limitations to the pedagogy. So I walk into classrooms daily, and there is a lot of authentic, interactive movement, even in the current COVID state of restrictions with distancing. And I have spoken to colleagues that have the live streaming, and it creates a fixed state classroom that can be compensated for with technology. So there are conversations, and that was the original, when I came onto the district, there had been the decision to have the current model that we have, because of the authenticity of instruction that the current model offers and the concerns around the shift to instruction and what is lost. So the next week I've scheduled small group discussions with teachers to discuss that instructional shift. Chris and I are meeting with the directors to discuss the needed technology for that shift. I did express the concerns, and I know that there are concerns around screen time now. So I recognize those, but currently teachers create abbreviated videos that are not the full time in the classroom. And that when we do live streaming, we have to be cognizant that that might become a concern. So what I have discussed is that as we shift and discuss what this looks like, that we survey students during and throughout, because some students have said that they have landed at a space of equilibrium. So in the current 2 asynchronous days, they will do things like schedule their day where they go for a walk in the morning or exercise or run, and in a live stream model, they have to be present on the bell schedule. So I want to make sure that we don't create second order challenges that could not be productive for students in any shift that we do. So, but I do think that I'm a believer in striking a balance. And as we do that, asking students at the high school if this is working for them. So it's a meeting. I met with the staff. I'm meeting with small groups of teachers next week, meeting with the directors, and Chris and I are meeting with Elliot to discuss what it looks like. I also want to take a trip to a school that's doing this with a small group of teachers, because those schools have raised concerns around screen time and around loss of creative, authentic pedagogy of teaching just the kids in front of you without worrying about connecting the two cohorts. I walk classrooms every day, and I want to make sure we don't lose that authenticity of the instructional model that exists, where their attention is just on the students on site, especially now when students are at a loss for authentic human contact. And we want to make sure that that's not lost in any shift that we do. But there is by the end of the week, next week, we'll have had discussions with an entire cohort of small groups of teachers and the tech director to talk about the details. And the following week, I would like to do a visit to a school with this model and actually have an honest conversation about what the caveats are. I'm also cognizant that shifts mid-year could create a shift to an equilibrium that students have settled on, teachers and students. And I want to make sure that as I count, and there's about 20 weeks of this COVID-based restrictions to instruction when you take out, and I want to make sure that as we shift mid-year, we don't create something that can be negative in consequence. But I do see, I'm a believer in balanced approaches to instruction and being also cognizant of necessary tweaks to the model. So navigating thoughtfully, but there's a plan in place now to move forward with conversations with staff.
I just wanted to add on to what Eric's saying, because we've been in some of those conversations together. And first of all, thank him for really exploring this. You know, we've settled on a model. Now opening it up again is hard. Our teachers are willing, the willingness in there. They're asking really smart questions about how it's going to work. And we want to give them templates and models so that they'll be successful and that it will work and won't take away from the in-person model. That we want to be very delicate with that.
And I appreciate that. I do know that Regis did it, and has been doing it actually even before the pandemic. That you had the ability, if you were absent, to queue in. I believe Friends Academy is also doing a fully synchronous model along with their instruction. But I guess my question to you is, when do we think that a fully synchronous schedule would be available based upon, an estimate of time? And I guess my concern is that in the last the first meeting, I guess not the last one, but in the first meeting, we talked about covering the material for the regents. And as of yet, we don't have the June regents canceled. And so I'm wondering when we would get if we go to a fully synchronous, when would that happen? And would that assist in covering the materials that would be required for the regents and for regents review?
So the plan now is so in addressing the regents, I agree. We don't know where the state is going to land in June, or thinking also about the AP exams. One of the things that I have found in at least the last 5 to 10 years with regents is that depth of knowledge matters as much as breadth. So when students, so it's not, I'm thinking of my time in high school, it was about the coverage, and you would get the 100 or the 95 plus if you got to the coverage. Now there's a stronger validation in a very good way towards depth of knowledge. So like the last spring's AP format was less breadth, but deeper thinking. So the current model, not to say we're staying in this because we are going to make tweaks and shifts, does offer in the live instructional days, particularly the 2 days in person, a strong attention to personalized instruction that gets to that depth. And that's what I want to make sure we don't lose, because when teachers are there, when students are there on those 2 days, the attention and the detail and the depth of conversations and discussions and analysis in the regents-based classes, but really all classes in the AP classes, gets to that type of critical thinking that leads to the what's being validated now more on the assessments from the state and the AP exam. What I would propose is that we try it out with 2 content areas, one humanities, one STEM. And I really want to survey the students. I think that we haven't captured sufficient student voice. Students have heard that there's a conversation to this end, and some have stopped me. I talk to constituent groups, and they have said, please, talk to us, because they want to be part of how this is going to impact their own experiences and their own education. And while I acknowledge that they are children and they're teenagers, I think that it's important that we listen to how they experience instruction during this very atypical time. So I think that looking at this as in a very data-driven, clinical way, thinking about trying this out and then doing a survey and having conversations with the students to see if this is wise. It may be that this works in some content areas, but really the kind of personalized non-camera, just those 10 kids in the class or those 7 students on those 2 days leads to that deeper personalized experiences. So just to cite some examples, the classes, and if you saw the video that was created earlier in the year, those were vignettes of just incidental anecdotal classrooms that were streamed together, that I streamed together. They were the kind of things that are very difficult to capture when you put students in very rigid spaces with certain camera angles. So I want to make sure, I want to be clear. I think that we should explore possibilities because we want to model seeking alternatives all the time. We tell children to do that. And we can't be so rigid that we can't explore other possibilities, but we also want to make sure that we move thoughtfully, keeping in mind how this could have second order consequences that we don't anticipate. So if it turns out that this is terrific, I think that's a conversation for expansion. And if it turns out that students say, this is absolutely not constructive to that deep learning, that authentic experience where it's just me and getting to know the teachers in those spaces where it's just the teacher and the student that are not inexistent, because everything now is this, what we're doing now. And those spaces are so important to have. So I think we make that assessment after trying it out in 2 content areas for 2-3 weeks, and then survey. And I would love to discuss that with the board and unpack those surveys to see what they tell us. And sorry for the long response.
No, I appreciate the depth of the response, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness that's going into the process. And I do believe student voice, especially at the high school level, having raised 2 teenagers is important. They're not going to do what you don't want them to do. They're pretty resistant and have their own ideas. But on the other hand, there has been, a demand that we have heard for a more meaningful day on the 2 days where the students are home. So if we could figure out a way to do that as expeditiously as possible, because, the clock is ticking, it's January. AP classes really end in April because the exam is in May. So the Regents classes, you have a little more time. All right, but and the other concern is I appreciate the depth is important, and maybe in some realms more important than breadth, but we do have to make sure that these students are prepared for their college experience. And it really depends on the college that they go to, whether the college is equipped to close those gaps. There's a big difference where you go to a small college with small classrooms and a big college with, 500 kids in the room. So, not that one is necessarily better than the other, but some may be better equipped to deal with those. There's got to be gaps and deficiencies from this whole COVID experience are, unavoidable, but to the extent we can minimize them, I think that's really our job. So however you can do that, I'm sure the board would be supportive of it. And we thank you for your efforts.
Likewise, thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you, Dave. First of all, I really want to thank all of you for the incredibly thoughtful presentation that we saw before and the extensive backup material we got that obviously was a tremendous amount of work and was incredibly informative. Thank you. And thank you, Chris, in particular. I know you had to spearhead a lot of this, and I don't doubt a lot of it had to get done over the break. So please know how much we appreciate the effort and the work that went into giving us this much information in such a turbulent time, right? Where all the benchmarks have shifted on us. Thank you. And also I have to point out, in part, I think just because Eric just spoke, but that I really appreciated the thought that is going into everything we do. And that was such a great example of the thought that's going into how to handle synchronous and asynchronous days. And I can't express enough support for the idea of actually going out and testing it first in a very specific, thoughtful way, and then really getting that student feedback and taking that into account before we make further changes. I'm grateful that you're here, and I just completely applaud such a thoughtful approach. So thank you. In going through all the material, I think one of the things that stood out to me was that in a lot of ways, there is this theme of a lack of time, right? Which makes sense. There is a lack of time. And there's pressure on how to use the time we have, with this sort of laser precision. And it's incredibly difficult. And one thing that came up in the last report and in this report, I think because of the schedule we had to come up with at the middle school with these much shorter classes, is some very specific thoughts about the short classes in the middle school and the issues that's causing. And so I wanted to know, I understand there are no easy answers to anything, if we are having any discussions about the use of time in the middle school, given those themes across these two reports.
I'm going to say one thing, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Dennis. But Mr. Dennis, Mr. Minchell and I did meet a couple of weeks ago to look at living environment and what we could do with additional staffing. So we're building a conceptual model there. We are wondering how the administration or non-administration of the Regents exam might impact the need for that. But we do, Rob and Steve developed a really solid plan that we have for how that could be helpful, and Rob made it work in his schedule.
And with respect to that idea of time, that's certainly, I think, that's probably the biggest, if not the biggest, the top three biggest concerns that the teaching staff has, right? Because they're used to delivering content at a minimum of 40 minutes a day, and in many areas 60 minutes a day, 60 minutes every other day, etc. So you're right, teachers have had to really spend an incredible amount of time, both during their daily or weekly department meetings, team planning meetings, after school department meetings, and then of course just after school on their own planning time, figuring out how are we going to take a course that meets on average 50 minutes a day and get it done in 30 minutes. So they're being creative, of course. That idea of flipped instruction. A lot of the 7th grade pre-algebra classes are assigning videos to watch for homework. So there might not be like that traditional idea of the rote practice, do these 10 problems, 15 problems, whatever, but it might be watch this video and then come to class the next day, prepared to talk about it. We have found some kind of cool advantages of our new schedule, right? If I think a little bit about the 6th grade, we have kind of these two found periods that we've created. 6th grade academy time, which really focuses on, in addition to classroom culture building at the beginning of the year, kind of time management, executive functioning, and then also an academic support class that every 6th grader has, where they're getting, their extra help from a teacher. Their teachers typically rotate. So on a given team, the turquoise team, period 11 has academic support. So one day the math teacher's with room 97, then he goes the next day to room 98 and might not provide brand new instruction in math, but is able to answer questions and help kids with some extra content. Aside from that kind of extra time and the idea of flipped instruction, I think teachers are being really, really, I think you used the term like laser-like precision in their planning. I was just in a living environment class yesterday with a living environment teacher. She still found a way to do a lab demonstration. She did a dialysis demonstration. Kids did some hands-on learning. She took out, certainly a lot of the stuff that I'm sure she would have done, but the decisions that she made were focused on the most important content. I've been asked a few times, if the world ever gets back to normal very quickly soon, would we be able to do anything different in our schedule? Would we go back to our traditional 9 periods, 40 minutes? And I'm not confident right now that I could say yes. But like Dr. Zublionis said, we are looking at other ways to remedy that, right? So one concern I have is living environment. I know we're not talking about the sciences tonight, but living environment is a concern. That's only 30 minutes a day instead of 60. So Mr. Minchell and I, came up with a proposal for increasing that time. And then, I meet with the directors weekly or monthly, and we talk about what we can do to help with that loss of time. When I spoke with you all a few months ago, I talked about how this year is kind of a response year to COVID, and next year will continue to be a reaction and recovery year. And I do think that, if next year we're back to a normal schooling world, certainly maybe there are some modifications we'll have to make, but if it's more normal, I do think we're going to be looking at recovery next year. So maybe looking at curriculum writing over the summer or curriculum modification to ensure that the gaps that exist right now can get addressed in a different way.
I think one thing we're going to take away from this, just to build on Rob's point quickly, is that even when we are quote unquote back to normal, whatever that is, I think we need to do different types of exit assessments and continually do that loop of exit assessment, curriculum modification much more frequently than we have in the past, and really exercise that thoughtful approach and look at suggestions for summer work for kids, really pay more attention to the summer slide on a regular basis.
And I'm glad to hear that we feel like there's still some time in the year to look at how we're using time during the day and where we might really need to come up with ways to put more time into something, if it's living environments or whatever it is. And I think your point about finding things that have been positive is really important too, right? Like, we all want to find these silver linings in this difficult experience. And there are advantages, right? For example, to the remote meetings. For example, the audio is better for people watching remotely than when we're sort of trying to speak through our mask into the microphones in the auditorium, apparently. And so as part of that, like when we're reading all of these materials, there were these issues with times, but there was also some anecdotal stuff in that material that indicated the shift in time had been positive. I think it was like the 6th grade language classes, right? Reported that 30 minutes kind of worked better for them, right? That they were at that age able to maintain some real sort of enthusiasm and energy, and the time worked better. And so if we were able to learn some things like that from our, I'm going to say, unintended experiment, in the sense that it was thrust upon us that we had to experiment, all of those things are incredibly interesting, right? And it would just be a huge advantage to be able to take those things away from this experience. And it also reminded me of, there was a reference in the backup to the read alouds that the middle school had last year, which were just an incredibly positive experience in a lot of ways. And I was really impressed with some of the material, the books that they were reading to the middle school kids, and the backup materials that they were providing to put. I think they were reading a historical novel and providing videos that showed the kids more information about what they were talking about. And I wasn't sure if the middle school was still doing that this year. I mean, I hadn't heard about it personally, but that doesn't mean, obviously, that it wasn't going on. And it just seemed like with the different schedule that we have, where there are a lot of, there's a brain break, there are spots in the day where you would feel like that could be going on. So I did want to hear more about the read alouds, or from last year, or what we learned, or about this year, what was going on.
Miss Ritter, would you be able to comment on that? I mean, I know you can comment on that, but.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to see everybody, and hope everyone is well. It's really great seeing you. I just want to say, before I answer your question, Sarah, which I will, I am so proud of, I just have to tell you how proud I am of our kids and teachers. And I know that, Chris's film brought you inside our world just for a little while, but if you could be in our shoes and walk the halls and go into classrooms, see the stuff that we're seeing, you'd be smiling all the time, I promise you, because it's magical what's going on. It's really incredible. When you have time, click on all those links, that giant document that Chris gave you. There's like a bunch of links and we have more stuff in there. So when you have time, please take a look at more of it. I know you're so busy, but so what we learned from the read alouds is that it's all about engagement, and it's all about that sense of community and sharing that experience of, you know, the universal emotions and ideas of characters, and how we learn about ourselves and learn about other people through characters and learn about life, and sharing it through a read aloud and having that, the conflict resolved and sitting on the edge of your seats together is a really important part of literacy. It's a really an important part of building that sense of community and that shared experience. And yes, we are doing it in the middle school. And we did it with Color in My Worlds. And I happened to walk into a classroom right at the climax of the novel, and the kids were dying. Like, it was palpable. It was unbelievable. So we're totally doing it. And we learned that read aloud is very, very powerful. Thank you very much for asking.
In fact, a couple of weeks ago, Ms. Ritter and I actually observed a teacher, and the librarian was pushing in and doing a read aloud. So the librarians support that work. They're continuing to support that work also.
Yeah, Chris, I'm glad you brought up the librarian, because I actually was going to mention that our librarian, Ms. Livingston, has managed to do an incredible job at still supporting not only the ELA classes, but other content area classes that are focusing on research. And in fact, she and Julie have recently designed book clubs that are going to begin at lunchtime. So kids who are interested in a normal year, we've got 1,000 different options for kids at lunch. This year, less in terms of what to do. So we're trying to, figure out a way to give kids more opportunities. So I think tomorrow is the first day of the book clubs at lunchtime. I don't remember exactly where they're happening. I'm sure one of the options is outside, but also might be
in the boys' locker room.
The boys' locker room.
Locker room.
The hallway, right? But there are kids who are signing up. Anywhere from maybe 5 to 10 kids, and we're hoping to continue promoting, reading in venues like that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other trustees who have a question for the directors? Or thanks, Rich.
Okay. Thank you very much. I was looking through, and there was mention made specifically about social studies, but I think it's probably a general issue about the difficulty in the hybrid model with assessment. And I certainly understand how difficult that must be. I was just curious in terms of what sorts of things we're doing. I don't know that you can, the number of assessments obviously would have to decrease. So I'm just interested in terms of what sorts of things are being done, particularly in the programs that ultimately end in an external exam.
Seth, you want to start, or would you like me to?
Do you want to start, Gary? You can be.
Sure. So thank you for the question. Assessment is something that we have certainly spoken a lot about in these times, because our time when students are with us in person is so valuable. That is the golden time. And we don't want to see our kids sitting, taking exams for the limited time that they are with us. So we have explored ways to have performance assessments that are authentic, that are problem-based, real world, that are meaningful to our students, but give us that quantifiable and qualitative information of how our students are doing. What are they doing well? Where are their gaps? What are their weaknesses? So particular to social studies, students are working on research. They're looking at different documents. What's the origin? What are the limitations of those documents? Developing research questions. And that goes across all of the subject areas, especially for the advanced level classes, that kids have to really work on the skill of developing good research questions. That's a hard skill for them to do. So their teachers are working with them in each of the subject areas to develop appropriate research questions, find appropriate documents and backup for the work that they're doing. And they're working in partnership with the librarian as well. A lot of times you see Donna Rice like popping into a meet or being in the classroom with the teacher, talking to the kids about finding sources, how to develop their research, and going through that process with the guidance of her as the researcher and the content specialist in their teacher.
Yeah, to piggyback on what Carrie's saying, and I think this is a good example to kind of show Rich kind of what some of the things they're doing. You know, we have a social studies teacher that's all virtual, and his course ends, you know, 2 of his courses end in exams, as far as we know. And one of the things of the IB history course is the IA and really developing your research. And, you know, the nice thing was having the cohorts of the smaller groups was that individualized feedback of showing kids how to like take a topic and make it more narrow, how to take an article, find key parts to take, you know, what might be a really big topic, and is it too narrow, is it too big, and being able to give individualized feedback. So the nice part was some ways that you can break down the task into smaller pieces and look at it more like, here are the things throughout the year we need to do. Let's leverage the smaller class sizes in these cohorts in the high school to kind of take advantage of that. So that's one of the approaches that we've seen teachers in courses that end with, especially with writing style exams, which occurs in whether it's AP Gov or IB or, you know, courses, or even your Regents courses. Another thing that some of the Regents teachers are doing is looking at, we have 2 new social studies assessments. We didn't get to take the global the first time, and the US is new. So if those Regents do occur, we spent a lot of time doing some PD in the summer. And I've invited Greg Alquist back to work with teachers in the fall, and then probably again the beginning of this year, to kind of look at how do we break down those assessments into the skills, because there's kind of a balance of skills and content now, where history used to be, as Eric had mentioned earlier, kind of all about the breadth. Now they're trying to find more balance. And, you know, so instead of saying like, here are some documents learn about the topic, you'll have days where teachers will say, well, let's just embed some of those types of questions or the skill that we need to see them get there. And then with that small cohort, I can, you know, in the COTOC classes, I've seen them break even a small class into smaller parts where kids can do one together, they can do them on their own, and then kind of setting them up for greater independence as the year goes along. And, you know, and there's some ways, because, you know, that you have some sources to look at in social studies, and you know you get those, and you don't have to have memorized all that content to look at them. That by focusing on some of those skills, we hope that prepares them, even with some of the content that maybe might be, you know, not as familiar as it might have been had I been more time or every day of having that 40 minutes, you know. So there's just different ways that we're trying to approach it with compacting, breaking it into smaller parts. You know, you'll still have some of the tests because we still want to give some of that just to be able to give kids feedback. And it's also even more important feedback to the teacher of how kids are performing. So it still occurs, but we try to make sure, as Carrie said, they save the valuable time in class and not do it like every 2 weeks. Like it's almost like perhaps we were on a place where we were doing it a little too much. And this has asked us to back it off a little bit and then just really take those diagnostic moments and be really informative to us to improve the instructional piece, rather than, you know, using it more frequently, hoping that by doing it every 2 weeks, we would get them to the place we want to go. If that makes some sense. I think that's kind of the approaches in different degrees.
Thank you.
I'd like to add, Trustee Galati, I was thinking of you. I've been thinking of you frequently, especially in science classes, because we've had this discussion about how to create science and more authentic, how to create those spaces that actually emulate the kind of college level science where kids are actually doing science. So one of the silver line, or one of the secondary benefits in this craziness of COVID has been that teachers have really been creative in how to use the time in person in very deliberate, creative, and I dare say joyful ways. I was in a class, with chemistry, and they were doing a really authentic lesson on pH, and it was hands-on, it was discussion rich, it was instead of taking the exam. And but those kinds of discussions will actually, as we know, as educators, will lead to positive performance in the standard-based assessments. Same thing in a bio class. There's a rich conversation with data, scientific level conversations on speciation, and neuroscience class where they were out in the hallway looking at orbits through spheres like balls and marbles, and it was that kind of space where the school could have gone in the opposite direction. It could have used that space to just test and assess. Having said that, I think there is we can't ignore that might be that is a reality. So some of those pieces are being done. They get assigned questions that they would be exposed to, but it's flipped. They're doing that in the days that they might not be there, or they're doing that as part of assignments that they do at home, and then they discuss that in the class. But I have to say, and this is reiterating also Julie Ritter's point, is that there is a joy to learning, even in this difficult time, that actually excites me on a daily basis as we go into classes. So, but thank you for that question. And one of the hopes is that maybe we can keep some of those ideas that teachers have come up with to say where are our values and how we use instructional time, and that allow us to actually get kids to be positively successful in those Regents and AP and IB exams without diminishing that authentic learning that is so much at times more important than the Scantron sheet. Scantron sheet matters. I'm not ignoring that. I want to be clear about that. But the authentic learning matters forever, right? So, but thank you for the question. It just makes me think of what happens every day in the classrooms.
I just want to add on to what Eric said. Julie Ritter and Carol and I have been talking about a problem practice for us. How do we create a space for teachers to create more authentic a design, more authentic unit plans, performance-based? That's a shift maybe from what they've been doing in a stressful time. And I think we've gotten to the point after trying a few different things where I think we need to dedicate collegial circle time to that after school. So that I wanted to update you, and I will in my board update as to where we are with that. We tried a couple different avenues. I think given the unique nature this year, I think that's the point that we're at, really providing after school curriculum time for teachers who are interested. And Julie and Carol have done a lot of work on that. Several of us have been involved in that. So I think we can lead that PD and that planning time.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Tim, did you have your hand up earlier?
I did, but Rich just asked the question. It was regarding assessments. So
okay, great.
Good timing.
Very good. Lisa?
Thank you, everyone. The presentations get better and better, even during this time. I think this is a great kind of venue for conversation. I find I can see you all here, and I'm not going to repeat everything everybody said because I totally concur. I'm going to go right straight into mental health. And I know all the work that's gone into planning last summer for mental health for our students, having them develop their skills at the elementary level all the way on up. And I just want to thank the mental health teams, from the counselors to the social workers, school psychologists, all the way K through 12. Thank you so much. And I'm lucky to be able to work with all of you on the mental health committee. So I'm just going to ask some questions. The district provided some professional development this summer for staff. And I was wondering if you've gotten any feedback from those educators and staff that took advantage of that PD. And have they been able to institute the skills that they learned, for example, from the trauma-informed classroom and the mental health first aid, and even for their own self-care? Have you gotten any feedback on how those have been useful for them, where it's not been useful, if they've needed some time to kind of get some more guidance maybe from our internal staff? I know we have some plans going forward with the SEL committee to provide some more guidance and consulting for us. I'm interested in knowing how it's working for our educators.
I know Mr. Doherty's here. The one thing I'll say right off the bat, Lisa, is that we had a very positive reaction to the trauma-informed classroom work. Not that the mental health first aid wasn't positive, and we had 50 people who did the mental health first aid. We had 4 sessions of trauma informed. And we just had a much stronger reaction to that. And Dan might be able to speak to why that was, the practicality of it, the timing. But I think the big issue that Dan and I talk about often is how do we bring that to scale? How do we bring both mental health first aid and trauma informed strategies to the entire, our 425 certified professionals? So Mr. Doherty, would you mind commenting on that?
Sure, yeah. And I agree with Chris. I think we had very positive feedback with both. The trauma informed, I think, was a little more like the mental health first aid speaks to when students are in crisis, obviously. So that's, may not happen as often, in the classroom with teachers, but it teaches them how to respond, language to use, and then where to go next in terms of referrals. And that's been happening. The trauma informed classroom, I think, did a good job, and I sat in on those in terms of tweaking the mindset of teachers and really putting them in the mindset that we're in the middle of a pandemic and students' homes aren't going to look the same as they did in the past. So as we enter the classroom in September, we may need to tweak our expectations and understand that students, may be going through things that they weren't previously, or students that were already going through things that, this may be a much worse situation. So I think the teachers throughout the district, just to echo what the directors have been saying, have been wonderful in terms of being open-minded to implementing SEL approaches, to trying to find new ways to engage students. And I think those professional development opportunities just gave them some ideas, helped in terms of tweaking their mentality a little bit moving forward. Not that they weren't open-minded of that to begin with, but I think it put it at the forefront of their mind and was helpful in that way. And the teachers that were in it, said that they actually want more of it. So hopefully we can, as we progress to this summer, do kind of a part 2 as we move forward.
Right. Has there been an increase in referrals to the counseling departments and the mental health teams in the buildings? I noted in the report that the teachers had noted that there was, obviously in certain areas, there was cohort fatigue, being in the same classroom for the whole day, especially in middle school. You're not really moving other than getting outside for instruction, but you're still with that same cohort. And the social regression that, is a risk of occurring. Has the referrals to the departments been increasing? Is it the same? Are the mental health professionals able to schedule enough time for these students outside of their mandated students that, that they have to set aside time for, the mandated EIEP kids?
I would say that there's students that are on our radar now that weren't previously, I think, due to the pandemic and due to the different learning models that they're in. I think some of the transition points, like some of the 9th graders, I think may have struggled with the transition to the high school. Some of the 6th graders, maybe a little bit with the transition to middle school, because it's such a unique year in terms of how we were entering those students into the building. So I know at the high school, there's been a lot of work with the 9th graders. And in the high school where the students are there every other day, it's challenging for social workers and psychologists and counselors to pull students, because we don't, to the point that was made earlier, like we don't want to take them out of class when they're only in school 2 days a week.
Right.
And on Friday, there's synchronous learning. So it's the same idea. So we've tried to do Google Meets, and it really depends on the students. Some students are open to that and some prefer it, and some don't want to do counseling through a computer, which makes sense. Counseling is such a interpersonal skill, right? It's hard to do it through a computer. So, while I think there's some challenges there, it hasn't been a drastic increase, but I think some students have struggled with everything going on, and we're doing the best we can to meet their needs. We are also, in terms of student voice at the high school next week, Monday through Thursday, we're having student focus groups led by Ms. Berg, our social worker at the high school. I'm going to do them with them. Eric's going to pop in when he can, really to hear from the students more in a, give them an opportunity. We're doing it during all the lunch periods for them to come down and share how it's going. And, we have the certain students that are in our office every day, and we hear a lot from them. Like, we want to hear from students who aren't circulating in the guidance office every day. Like, what's going on? How's it going? To the point about switching from the asynchronous to synchronous, you know, we want to hear, like, have you gotten comfortable on your asynchronous days, and how would that shift change? Because when we did shift and close, we had some families that said this was amazing. We had others saying, I really didn't like that. I don't like being in front of a screen all day. So we do want to hear that student voice.
Right. I was glad to hear
question was?
that at the last meeting, you expressed and Eric had expressed the identification that there are kids who, especially at the high school, who had identified the fact, even if they didn't have an IEP or a 504, and their learning difficulties or the time management in executive functioning areas, that even the typical kid, the typical student, average student was having some difficulty adjusting to their off day, so their asynchronous day, and how to manage their day and their time and their work, especially those who are, on the screen from 8 in the morning until possibly 10, 11, 12 at night getting the work done.
Yeah, and I think the counselors and social workers have, on those days, they're trying to meet with students and help them, they'll meet with them first period and say, let's talk about what you're going to do today, and kind of walk them through that. In Chris Marino's world, I know the special ed case managers are doing that as well, for the students that aren't in every day. So we're helping them as much as we can.
So from the special ed side, I bet Joe and Chris could probably answer that. Has there been good compliance? Because the high school kids typically, they will either, if they have, it's probably not so much going to speech or OT as much as it is in maybe the K through 5 or K through 8 venue. But so for counseling, are they compliant with their appointments to comply with their IEPs?
At the elementary level, I would say yes. If they're, are you talking about if they're remote, or if they're, say, quarantining, or if they're just in school?
Okay, so for instance, high school, are they compliant to getting to their services?
I don't know if Joe would take that, but for the most part, I believe that they are. I'm sure there are definitely cases of students that are not possibly attending related services, but that's not something that's necessarily based on maybe the pandemic. I think when we get to the high school, we do have a certain amount of disconnect with that, and sort of counseling students to make them aware of how important some of these services still are, especially if they're getting things like speech and language or things like that. Counseling, I think they're steady with, but I'll let Joe talk a little bit more about that.
I think one of the things that was helpful is that we started meeting with students virtually last year with the psychologists and the social workers for counseling in both the middle school and the high school. So this year the transition wasn't new. So students are being met with on the virtual days by social workers and psychologists, and I'm in communication with the social workers and psychologists pretty regularly about this. And there really hasn't been many cases where students are unwilling to show up on the computer screen, and often the experience is very good because it's very individualized. So I would say yes, there's good compliance from the student end of it.
Okay, so Chris Marino brought up the other side in terms of kids on quarantine in the lower grades. How are we compliant with getting them their related services remotely?
Yeah, I mean, if they're on quarantine, we are offering either services, at another time of the day. If they're individual services, then the teachers can still meet with them through a Google Meet,
right,
within their regular schedule. If it's a group session, they may meet with them individually outside the school day or during their prep. Or if one of those two options are not working, there's certainly always work posted to Google Classroom for that time of quarantine. So to the extent that we can, we certainly try to meet the IEP mandates. And the same thing with those who are on remote. We are providing direct services through Google Meets, resource room type supports for our students. So meeting either in a small group or for 40-minute sessions daily to work on IEP goals, academic goals, and same thing along the lines with our related services as well. So for the most part, the remote students have been participating. We've had some that have been inconsistent, and those we've had to reach out to families several times and sort of create a plan for those students to get them back on track. So, but for the most part, I'd say it's been a very positive experience.
Are they making gains now that, especially the kids who are back in school? The last meeting, there was some concern about they had some learning loss that was more than typical of what you would normally say. And you do, I know the special ed educators, they make reports a little more often than I think the regular semester base and report card time. So I'm sure they're on top of things a little bit, from day to day even.
Yeah, they're definitely progress monitoring their IEP goals. And I would say that there's definitely an increase in skills. I think they're rebuilding in some of those areas that there was regression. We did IEP progress reports, and in speaking with teachers, for the most part, they'll speak to either Joe or I if they have concerns about a particular student and where they are with their goals. And I didn't see a lot of that for this first marking period. I think for the most part, there's been a lot of consistency because the students are back in and receiving those services consistently. So I think for the most part, we've been on par.
And we'll assess that, Ms. Ritter and Ms. Small too, will assess that through the STAR assessment and the other literacy assessments will continue. And I'll continue to update you on the subgroup analyses because that's very important to us.
Have whatever, I don't know the extent to which you're offering some programs to parents and what you have done, are parents been receptive, or are parents asking for some help and guidance in certain programs on how to support their kids in their learning during COVID and remotely? SEPT is always out there as a partner. And they had a really, really good Google Meet last night on anxiety. And of course, COVID came into almost every conversation, which is so interesting. So I'm interested to know what parents have been reaching out to you in terms of looking for additional support, targeted support for them to support their own children.
I can jump in on that. We do have a partnership with an outside consultant, David Heimowitz, who's a clinical social worker. And he's run, I want to say 5 parent workshops thus far this year on coping with COVID, on finding hope and resiliency. He ran, the first one was kind of return to school. The second was now that we're in school, how are things going? And what I like about David's presentations is he makes them interactive so parents can share, and it almost ends up being like a group therapy session. And the feedback we've gotten has been positive, and parents have certainly been reaching out to counselors and social workers and psychologists for support in terms of individually for their children. But those workshops with David have been successful and received positive feedback thus far. He's actually presenting it with Ms. Wojcik at the Seacliff PCA meeting next week. So,
Thank you. I'm looking forward to seeing more from David going forward in our committees. Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Lisa. Chris, of course, as I said, I really appreciate the presentation, particularly the video. As Julie said, it's so great to see the kids out there singing, spaced. We had seen the video last time, Chris, and you started with the pre-COVID shots, and this really focused on the COVID shots. And you see, even with the masks, you could see those kids smiling. You could see them interacting. You could see them having that that growth that we're really trying to achieve. I very much appreciate, both in your backup and in this report, the focus on the question that we asked last time about getting the kids on that road back, as you say, and where they are and monitoring that. I don't want to rehash any points that have been said because my fellow trustees have done a nice job covering a lot of aspects of this report, although it is voluminous, and of course we couldn't cover everything. My question really has to do with, particularly at the early ages, but really throughout, and not necessarily for students who are classified, because those students have specific programs and are getting attention. But how do you identify, and what do you do about the kids that are particularly falling behind? You had said in the report, students are starting to grow toward grade level norms, which obviously implies that as a whole, they're not at grade level norms, although you said the disparity was broad. But how do you find those kids that need more?
Can I?
Yeah, Deborah, please.
Sure. Well, one thing that we've tried to do is through our assessments, we really look at the specific areas for each student of strength and weakness. And then we can tailor our small group instruction for students specifically to hit the area where they need to grow. So we have specific goals developed for each child within those small groups. And when we have students who need more rigorous intervention, we've been doing day-to-day discussions where we really look at the cases for their children and decide on the best ways to support them. In some cases, it's what can the classroom teacher do within the classroom, and in some cases, there might be a specialized need that they have where we pair them with a reading teacher to get that support. So we're really trying to hone in on, for each specific child, what is the area of need that will have the most impact, and let's give that child the support he or she needs.
And the assessment is the tool that really primarily identifies that.
Yes.
Okay.
In addition, Dave, the 3 elementary schools also have, this is Dr. Rufa.
I know, I could tell the voice. I wasn't sure where about.
It's always hard sometimes to see people in the screen. The 3 of us have what we call our ISTs. Those meet every 6 days with our school psychologists and our certified support team. That could be our speech therapist, that could be our OT. And those are students that we discuss based off of our classroom teachers' recommendations. They alert our school psychologists if they have a concern that a student might be falling behind academically, showing a need for social emotional support, some of those other services, and we start to build those in at a building level to help support our students as well.
Great, because certainly we all know that obviously from the academic side, that's crucial, particularly at those early ages. If you all know much better than I do, but if they have those gaps early on, it's hard to rebuild that later. But also the social emotional piece and the disconnect, and certainly throughout K through 12, and as we all know, I'm not saying anything anyone doesn't know, but it goes well beyond childhood ages. This has been a very difficult time for people, for parents, for everybody. I'm going to go out on a limb and say all 25 of us, and this is just a tough time. But through that IST team, identifying those kids who, at every age, are struggling beyond the quote unquote, the middle part of the standard deviation of struggles that need that help, and being able to find them to help them in a way that we do during a quote unquote normal year, with I believe effectively.
If I could jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
Yeah, the middle school, high school, we have SST meetings, similar to how Peter described the IST meetings at the elementary level, which is counselors, social workers, psychologists, assistant principals, myself, Rob and Eric will attend it, from time to time, and we discuss students that we're concerned about academically. Teachers will refer to the SST, and we'll come up with a plan as a group as to where to go next with them, and resources that are available.
I'd also like to jump in because I think one of the things that was actually very fortuitous of us last year was the beginning of our RTI committee. And I think actually what was really wonderful about that, and I know Deborah Small and I have had lots of conversations about this, was just really looking at the RTI framework and the manner with which we support students and defining those parameters and tools and strategies and building toolboxes for administrators, teachers, and students. And actually that was super fortuitous for us as we moved into an area now with the pandemic where we really needed to provide some support for students. So we did a lot of work with looking at the different tiers of instruction with Chris Marino and Chris Zublionis, and it was really, it was a very fortuitous. It was a great opportunity for us to reframe how to support students.
David, I'm glad you asked about that population, because in the high school, we're actually launching the Ohio Literacy Alliance Fluency Protocol, and I'm targeting 10R and 11R kids who don't really get too many services, but they are in those Regents classes. And the Fluency Protocol is interesting because it's something that's not often done in a high school context, but it's very similar to the Fontes and Pinnell running records that's done,
I don't know how young is it. Deborah would know in the elementary, but it's done in the middle school, certainly.
Hey,
but it's basically sitting one-on-one with the student and having the student read aloud a passage for 60 seconds, and then you score the student on 4 areas, and it's RAID, decoding, comprehension. And then we're going to actually start doing it next week, ironically, and identify kids who are in need of further service. There's been a lot of research about the connection between fluency and reading comprehension, and something that's often overlooked in the high school. So I'm excited about that.
I just wanted to say too that we will get you specific numbers when we get that winter data in, so we can show. I'm actually excited to see it because I think we are going to see a lot of progress, but we'll give you a clearer picture of the trajectory.
That's great. I think we all know that obviously the small classes that we try to keep in a regular year are such a great thing, at younger ages for sure. And now we have, in many cases, even smaller classes. And that's great for general learning, but it's also great for our teachers to be able to identify those kids that develop those relationships with those kids. This is the first time I've seen in any of these videos one of my own kids was in one of them finally. I shouldn't say finally, not a complaint, just saying. But I saw his class, and I've heard so much about his class, but the first time you actually see your kid in their class, and you realize, because they happen to be in a very large room, this small class, that's an opportunity for those teachers to realize which of those kids aren't doing aren't doing well, either from an academic perspective or from a welfare perspective.
If I can add to that, just that idea of class size. In a typical school year, a normal team at the middle school would have about 80 students, and this year teams range from, there's one team that has 24, but most teams have about 40 or 50 students. And the grade level teachers, whether they're general ed or special ed, who they have such an intimate knowledge of all 40 or 50 of those kids, which actually ties nicely back to the question that Sarah asked earlier about the concern that there is about the loss of time. And teachers have shared that while there is a loss of time, the fact that classes are so small, right? 10 kids, 12 kids, 14 kids is about the average right now. That helps with the lack of time, because you are able to maybe do a little bit more, have more kids talk in a conversation, in a spiderweb discussion, a Socratic discussion, look at student feedback, or look at student writing with a little bit more frequency or accuracy in a small group environment.
Before we go, Anna, you seem to have escaped here without any questions, but it was great to see the kids in the video too, and to see the children, speaking and moving ahead, and the integration of music and just seeing them progress as well is nice. I thought it was very interesting, Rob. You said that in some cases that 30-minute class for language may actually be a help. That it's you cover what you need, and that's good. So I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for reading the report, for your support of World Language Program. There were actually 2 things I made notes I couldn't interject. One was, Ms. Vizza, when you were talking about parent support, one of the things that's really important is that we make that support accessible to all parents, and those parents that don't speak English require that support. So we have our bilingual counselors that have held meets to address some of the same topics that we've addressed in English. In addition, BOCES offers evening, like an hour webinar, or it's live meets addressing COVID-related issues, social and emotional issues that I pass on to the ENL teachers that pass them on to the parents. And I know they have attended some, and they're in their target language. They've been in Spanish, Mandarin, and Turkish. Those have been the 3 that we've done. So I just think it's to support everyone and really make it accessible to all parents in the district, because everyone is struggling, and we try not to forget. I don't want to forget about that population.
Right. Thanks for adding that, because those are conversations, right, Dan? We've had them in the SCL committee meetings, and which really were started in the summer when we met the Spanish language counselors from that we had. So thank you for adding that. That's a very important thing to contribute.
And I just want to add, I want to thank Anna and Dan for that work with the counselors, because certainly at the elementary school, they have been very helpful to us on many occasions. And it's a wonderful resource, and we're very lucky to have it.
Thank you. The other point I just want to make, Mr. Galati, with assessments. So world languages, we really, the last 2 years have slowly been introducing the integrated performance assessments. And now, because of the situation, how teaching has changed, we really shifted into a lot of performance. Most of our assessments have shifted into that performance assessment, and it taps into the 3 modes of communication, where the kids in the target language get a lot of content from either reading or listening. They take that content and they engage in interpersonal. So they're using their speaking skills, using the content that they extracted from the reading or listening, and then they're able to present knowledge, and again, their speaking skills of taking content, but also demonstrating how they're using the language to communicate the information. And actually, one of our teachers, the state for world languages, is making a shift, and they're looking to change what it is, our regions, the FLAX exam, into a performance assessment. And one of our teachers actually created an assessment, and it's being used as an exemplar as we make this shift. So, we're really proud in our department, the work that's being done with the performance assessments.
I know one of our strategic plan goals is for teachers to present, for us to be a leader as a district, and the world language teachers are constantly presenting their item writing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, great. I appreciate it. I don't want to, if any trustees are, if I'm missing something, let me know, but I think we have really covered this, and I think it's a great presentation. It was like a shotgun out of the break here, but here we go. And I appreciate it. Peter, where are you? There you are. You don't speak for a while, Peter. You moved down in the tiling.
I'm not complaining.
Thank you both. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you all very much. And I do want to just, before we send you on your way, just make sure that you all know how much I appreciate your leadership and the innovative approaches and mentorship that you take in your work. This level of creativity and ingenuity does not happen everywhere, and our kids are thriving as a result of it. So give yourselves a pat on the back. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Bravo.
Good work, everyone. So don't feel like you need to stay, but although you're welcome to.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night,
Thank
everyone. And good work.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Let's get better every year.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.
Okay, as we say goodnight to our, well, there we go. They're all off. We're going to move on to comments from the public. We did receive some comments from the public that I have on a separate sheet here on my screen. And without further ado, I'm going to read them. Paul Pasculgen of Glen Head asks, information received from FOIL requests about budgeting and payments of health insurance for district employees shows the district has paid $12 million more than reported as expensed. For example, for 2018, the district reported an actual health insurance expense for teachers of $10,108,811, but the actual checks show payments of $12,878,852. For 2019, the district reported an actual expense of $10,565,332, but made payments of $12,963,979.93. So for each one, obviously I'm reading what he writes, but there's a gap of about $2 to $2.5 million. Since 2016, the data shows the district has paid over $12 million more than they've reported as expensed for health insurance. The actual expensed amounts are on the district website as reported to the public. Why? And this is the question. Why is there a difference between what the district reports as expensed and what they actually pay? Where did the $12 million go? Can you explain why the actual payments differ by over $12 million from what the district reported as expensed? All right, Peter, did you?
I can do that.
Great.
Okay. So the way our health insurance works here, and the difference between what you see in the what's being described here is that there are the $10 million that he's talking about is paid out of the general operating budget. That's what we budget for. The delta that you see is attributable to the employee contribution. So in generally speaking, a good rule of thumb to follow is most of our employees contribute about 20% to their health insurance. And so that comes out of their that comes out as a payroll deduction into what's called the trust and agency fund, and then that gets paid separately. So that's why you see that difference, right? There's also retirees there are a million different combinations of how this works. So, for example, when Olivia was explaining all of the details on this to me, if a retiree has retired and their active rate was in an increment of 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%, then that deduction gets taken right out of their pension check and submitted to TRS. If it is anything other than an increment of a 5, then we have to send it to them. Right. So there's COBRA payments, direct payments, there's retiree payments, there's all the employee contributions. So for example, in 17-18, the difference was $2.4 million, $2,437,967. And so that's where you see those differences. So they're just paid out of different places. Olivia, how does that sum it all up? Did I miss anything?
Yeah, well, this is what it gets, like the retiree piece, the 5%, the 10% that Peter is talking about. It goes to the Department of Civil Service has negotiated this with the retirement system, so it gets taken out as a credit from the invoice itself. So when you get the invoice, all those retiree payments is taken out. So even the the invoice is reduced by the retiree piece. And we also have all the others in between, the people who are paying 17%, because it depends on what rate you were at the time you retired. That's the contractual obligation. So all those people pay the check to us, and then we use it to offset the cost. So at one point, if you remember last November, we said we transfer some monies in our cash flow. We transfer some money from TNA into general fund to make up the cash flow. Those are some of the health insurance payment for employees. So we collected, it's considered a liability, and all those things are moved into the TNA fund because it's not our money, it's employee money. And we use that to reduce the payment. That's why our expense is lower than the check that we are paying, because we reimburse the code.
Good.
There's so many permutations and combinations, I have to use my word.
Olivia, can you also, you and I talked a little bit about, and I know Mr. Pascoljan, I don't know if he's watching tonight, but we can answer his question because he emailed me about it. We talked about how the admin and capital lines are pretty clean with the way this is reported, but the program line has a greater skew. Can you just explain why that is, please?
Yes, because when people retire, there are so many, people retire as custodians, teachers, all over. But it becomes very difficult to actually take the monies off from, have to classify where that person worked at the time, where that person was working, whether it's an administrator or a custodian, because those are how we classify the administration program and capital. The capital is basically for custodians, administration is self-explanatory, and program is teaching. So all the retiree pieces that we are talking about is from the program line. That's why there's so much movement going into that code, because there's a lot going out there. It also include people that the district had settlement with. So if you look at, when we detail it out, we invoice each person every 6 months, and then they pay to us. Rich can tell you more about that because he's into all this kind of thing. And then in addition to that, we have the Med-B, which is another thing altogether that goes on. And so there's a lot of movement going out there. And they also have to check to make sure that if somebody unfortunately passes, there's so many credits that goes into that account. So you have to sit down, look at it very carefully. But the good thing is that in the business office, we do all those invoices through WinCap. So we can always see the movement going back and forth. It's a lot. And you are dealing with active employees, retirees, people who have, people whose husband, they are dependents, but they pay the full cost. There are so many moving parts to this particular code. That's why it's very difficult to just say, this is the number and this is what you get. But the program component is used for all the moving parts. That's why it's very difficult to just reconcile it. And one other thing too that we do is that, remember, we take health insurance payment from September through June. So when you come, we don't take, because teachers are not here, we take it from September through June. So at the end of the year, we have to make sure that we have some monies on the books to cover the September, which is the employee portion, to cover July and August payment. So there are a lot of reconciliation that goes on in that.
Okay, thank you, Opie.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to be just confirm for folks to know, it's obviously very confusing and there's a lot of movement there. This is caught up in the internal audit. This is something that's looked at.
This is something that the both the external auditors and internal auditors and the claims auditors look at every time before we send the checks out.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Jerry Romano of Seacliff asks, why does North Shore give over $400,000 each year of our money, a whopping 86% more per person than nearby districts, for dental benefits to a benefit trust run by district teachers who pay themselves, buy meals, there is no contract, and is overfunded with more than $650,000 of our money? This dental plan is a scheme to take more money than it needs from this community. How will you get $650,000 of our money returned to us, teachers out of the dental business, and focus on teaching instead of lining their pockets with our money?
Do you want me to address that, Dave?
If you can.
Okay, sure. All right. So the way this works and is that in the contract, our contract with the teachers lays out the exact contributions that the district is required to make to the dental trust. That's every year. The Federation has their own trust with a separate board who manages the district contribution and the purchasing of the benefits and how they are allocated. Our responsibility to the trust is to make a financial contribution to it, and then the trust designates the actual benefits and the expenses. It is a matter of collective bargaining, and we are in negotiations with our teachers now. So we are looking at that, but I will say, having looked at the question, I don't see this as a scheme, and I don't see this as this is a benefit that teachers receive and retirees receive. And I will say I don't see them as lining their pockets with the district's money. They're purchasing benefits.
I think it's also worth saying that as far as collective negotiations, people know this, it's very hard to isolate one particular item and separate that from the rest of a very complicated collectively bargained contract. And so it's in isolation, it certainly all these things are worthy of being questioned, and we appreciate it. And it is helpful to have the community understand what we do through the asking of these questions. But it's very hard to parse individual aspects within a larger collective negotiation and isolate them as if they're not related to others. There's ebb and flow and compromise. There was a part 2 to that question, which is since 2014, North Shore has spent over $400,000 on lobbyists. Why is there no, quote, detailed record for 7 years of work they performed? Is this just another scheme to take money from this community?
If I can just go back.
Of course.
On 1 second, I'm sorry, to the dental trust. I don't recall the year that the trust was actually created. Does anybody know? It's a long time, right?
Yeah, it's a long time, and it's on the teacher's side.
Right. It was created. The point I wanted to make was that the trust was created many, many, many years ago, and there are certainly, while there might be aspects of the trust that we don't like, so there are some places that the district has a seat on the trust board. That is not the way this board is constructed in the actual construction of the trust. So it is a federation a federation thing. Okay.
In other words, once we arrive at that number that's collectively bargained to pay, we pay and we move on with our business.
Yes, more or less.
Okay.
Okay. The board hired a lobbyist, I guess back to 2014, to work on the LIPA. Before that, Marianne?
There were lobbying firms before 2014.
Okay.
There were lobbying firms in place from the time that we first heard about the LIPA on boards prior to mine. There were other lobbying firms that were retained prior to. I went on the board 2013, and there was already a lobbying firm in place that had been there several years.
Okay.
Greenberg Tuareg.
Right. Okay. And so I don't know.
I don't think anyone is asking anyone to go through and explain 7 years of or more of achievements from the lobbying firms, but in general, we're faced with LIPA. We have had other issues that LAC has focused on and has been discussed here, and our lobbyists help us with those advocacies. I think it's a pretty straightforward relationship between a district of our size that is certainly continues to have threats from a LIPA decommissioning that reverberate today. Nancy Pasculjan of Glenhead writes, for 5 years, district auditors have included the following statement in the district's annual independent audit reports. Quote, the district's general fund assigned balance sorry, let me start again. Quote, the district's general fund unassigned fund balance plus assigned special designated amounts were in excess of New York State real property tax law 1318 limit, which restricts it to an amount not greater than 4% of the district's budget for the upcoming school year. Real property tax law 1318 mandates the district to return to taxpayers the amount in excess of the section 1318 limit. For the last 5 years, the amount in excess of the 1318 limit is over $25 million. Why has the district been in violation of the real property tax law? Why has the Board of Ed allowed the district to repeatedly exceed the limit and violate the law? When will these funds be returned to taxpayers?
I could also take this, right? So the unassigned fund balance is capped at 4% of the operating budget. In this year, that number is $4,247,484.01. That's the 4% number. Back in 14-15, I believe, the district got a grant from Senators Marcelino and Assemblyman Levine, summing in a sum total of $5.4 million between the two. And the district had, at that time, had been lobbying very hard for a special reserve to put that money in. And that has to be done legislatively, which it has not done. That remains a priority for the district that we work towards. Over the course of time, we've worked with our auditor to include that as assigned fund balance. That is also in the auditor's report every year, that it's acknowledged and that there is a plan to spend it down. And so that $5.4 million that existed in 14-15 is now $1.156 billion. So we have been using that money to return to offset the levy. The second piece of that, and I do have to get more detail on some of this. So it is related to the a liquidated tax certiorari reserve that ties to the litigation between Nassau County, where they were looking to get rid of the county guarantee. And so that case was lost, and then it was on appeal. And since the appeal, was lost, that money in 2018-19, we started taking that money down and returning it to offset the levy from 2.5. It's now down to 1.154. If you take a look at our website, you'll see that over the course, we have a planned schedule to make sure that all of that money goes back to offset the levy as we move forward. So, but there is never, it's not $25 billion because it's not a 5 million. Let's say if we're $5 million each year, it's not 5 million that compounds 5 million, 5 million, 5 million, 5 million. It's the reserve doesn't double and quadruple over time. It's that one.
It's the same number.
Actually, that as we allocate the money from those assigned fund balances, which is what our auditors, and like I said, we're doing some research on this. Our auditors had recommended that we, when we liquidate the tax cert reserve, that we create the assigned fund balance in the same way that we use the LIPA money and then build the spending plan. And that too is also audited every year and noted in the audit report as well. Olivia, anything that I missed on that?
Oh no, we have it. The plan to use it is on the district's website, and we have to be very systematic about it, because we should look at it as, if you use it 1 year, then the following year you don't have it. So it can dip, it can cause a lot of havoc. That's why we laid out the plan consistently. You go up, you level it up, and then you start going down. And that's exactly the plan. If you look at the bar chart on the website, that's exactly how it is. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if you use all of it 1 year, the next year you don't have it. So it affects your operations. So you have to know how to, when it comes in, you have to lay out a plan of how to use it, and you have to know when to leave it, when you are getting out, it has to be smooth. That's what we did over the last couple of years. And in fact, even the LIPO money, you can see that it goes all the way to 2020 something, because we want to lay out a plan to use it in a very systematic way. And that's also tied to the lobbying. When we did the lobbying those days, that's how we got the $5.4 million. So everybody should remember that. It's tied to the lobbying. They got at the $5.4 million at that time.
Peter, the initial presentation of the budget for 21-22 is February 4-ish, whatever that early February meeting is. Do you have that note, Andy? Because I know that the full explanation of this has been included as a slide in your initial budget presentation each of the years that you've been here to show the graphic is the melting ice and to show it ebb. Exactly. And it's really a priority for this board, and we really hope everyone takes us up on this to really come and be at our budget meetings and hear what we're doing. We have so many different ways to try to get people to, for lack of a better term, pay attention to what we're doing as we're doing it. We want people to come. We want people to watch. And certainly we talk about silver linings to this pandemic. One of them is that this is an easier way that people viewing these videos, either in real time or when they're posted on the web, to see what we're doing. But I'm sure in your budget presentation, again, you'll have that chart as you've had to show the community and, of course, to explain to the board what your plan as an administration is for those funds. I also wanted to mention, of course, that comments from the public is not designed as a Q&A, and certainly we don't have the capacity to be able to answer every question, but these questions have been asked repeatedly, and it's important to us to be able to give that information. So asking those questions of this board for public comment is one avenue to do that. Our administration is open to speak with individuals who have questions or concerns, either by email or by phone. I think they have a very open door and at least open inboxes and open telephones to be able to communicate with the community, which I appreciate. I thank you for. And if people have questions, please let us know, because we can answer them for you. All right.
One more thing before we move on from that, just the dental trust is not just teachers, it's administrators and those who have the separate contracts in the district as well. It's covered by the benefit trust. It's not just only teachers.
And that agreement started in 1973.
Wow. Okay, that's a long time. Thank you, Rich.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we will move on to the action portion of our meeting. Action B is personnel. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second.
A second, thank you. Are there any questions or comments on these? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to action items, or letter C. Approval of a resolution pursuant to Education Law 913, directing an employee to report for a medical examination. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second? Any questions on this one? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Action D, resolution adopting a settlement and release of litigation claims. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Okay, thank you. All in favor of the resolution? Aye.
Aye.
Action E, approval of budget transfers in the amount of $112,000 to cover clerical salaries and removal of trees which came down on the central office grounds. Luckily, no one was injured. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
There you go. Any questions on this? Marianne?
Olivia, you noted that the tree removal and I guess the repair of the fence will be covered by insurance.
Yeah.
So we're taking the money out when we get the insurance reimbursement. Will that go back into the reserve?
No, we have to put it in as a cash receipt. it's two sides of the ledger. The auditors don't allow us to reimburse the code. I wish I could do that, but they don't allow us to reimburse the code. So it comes in, we have to expense the money and then get the reimbursement. And when we get a check, we put it in cash receipt as miscellaneous receipt or insurance recovery.
Okay, so that insurance recovery then will go into the general fund, correct?
Yes.
So that will be an increase.
We are not taking this money from the reserve.
Correct?
We are not taking this money from the reserve. No. It's coming out of general fund. And it will go back into general fund.
Okay, I thought it was coming out of a repair reserve. No. Reserve.
No, it's not coming out of repair reserve.
Okay, so it's just we're just going to do a budget transfer from a line item to pay it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on this one? Okay, all in favor of the budget transfer? Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. Action F, adoption of policies which were previously discussed. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, questions or comments or discussion on these? Okay, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Action G, approval of our spring 2021 community education instructors. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Thank you, Rich. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions or comments on this? I'd just like to add, we had some conversations about this and just implore the community, take advantage of these. Again, you can do it from the comfort of your own home. Most of them, not the horseback riding, but most of them. We definitely want you to take advantage of them. Any other questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Action H, acceptance of a donation from the Arts Angels of $2,600 for obtaining a service of a video and audio engineer. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second? I think we have a second. Okay, any comments?
And just say that this was, if you saw the Hallelujah Chorus performance, this was done by the same company to support it. The next, he will now work with our band and orchestra as well, I believe, right? But I have a note on this.
While you're looking, Peter, it is worth mentioning the Hallelujah Chorus was outstanding.
I agree.
Really great. That's not a surprise, but it was certainly nice to see. Is that posted on the website somewhere?
Yes.
I don't know. We'll take a look. I don't know.
I think it comes up on the homepage rotation.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in January, but that kind of cheer can extend.
It's still terrific. It's one performance. I think there's a performance for the band. There's a performance for the orchestra that they'll all have a. Chris, you're nodding yes, so that's good.
That's right. Yeah.
Lewis posted it on Facebook too. The
It
Hallelujah.
was fabulous.
Great.
Yeah,
I think that's where I saw it. Okay. All in favor of accepting this donation from the Arts Angels? Aye.
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 All right. On behalf of the board, thank you. Action item I, approval of an agreement between North Shore and Davidoff, Hutcher, and Citron, DHC. Is there a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Marianne?
I'm stating from this vote, we did not receive a report, and I asked last year, and I asked for a meeting, and that didn't materialize. So based upon the lack of information I have from last year, I'm standing on the vote for this year.
Thank you.
I concur with that, and I will also be abstaining from the vote for the same reasons.
Okay.
I'm
Sarah,
abstaining.
did you?
I'm abstaining as well.
Lisa's going to abstain. Sarah, did you have a?
Yes, I was going to say, first of all, that I appreciated that Marianne gave the explanation for the abstaining. I think people appreciate hearing that explanation. I also wanted to note that in the contract, it does have the 30-day cancellation clause. So we're in a good position in terms of being able to make changes going forward if we have any concerns about the contract.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, we engage this I'm sorry. Did I interrupt someone? In this contract, we engaged with this firm when it looked like at some point pre-pandemic a settlement with between Nassau and LIPA was right around the corner. And so while they'll have many advocacy issues for us, I think it is important from my perspective that we do move forward with them because we are likely to have advocacy issues that are going to be very pressing and we're going to need their assistance. So I'm looking forward to having them work for us this year. So I'll be supporting the
That is the larger point. Thank you, Dave. As will I.
Okay. Any other questions or comments before we call the vote? Okay. All in favor of approval of this agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And for the record, I'll skip the nays. All abstentions? All right. Thank you. Action item J, approval of a facilities use agreement between North Shore and LIU for the pool. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. Questions or comments?
They're dying to get in it. They can't wait to get in it.
Thank you.
I think they're already in it.
No, they're not.
Well,
They're not allowed to until the contract gets.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Great. Action K, approval of an agreement between North Shore and Shakira Ileana Doherty for costuming and costuming alterations. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Motion.
Thank you. Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We have approval of Action L, approval of two health services contracts. One with Jericho Union Free School District and one with Uniondale Union Free School District. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And I got a second too. Any questions on these? Comments, discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Action M, approval of an agreement between North Shore and Princeton Healthcare System, DBA Penn Medicine Princeton Health. Motion?
motion.
And a second? Thank you. Any question, Marion?
Peter, could you give me a little background on this contract? Are they providing services in New York, or do we have residentially placed individuals in Princeton? I just haven't seen this particular provider before.
No, it's a student who's been placed in a hospital setting in New Jersey, and when they are placed in a hospital setting, our responsibility is to provide the educational services to that student. So it's unusual that we would have a student there. It's not our placement. It's a placement. It's a student with some mental health needs.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion on this one? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, thank you, trustees. This brings us to old business. Anyone have any old business for today? Sarah?
I'll say yes. The HEPA filters, I think, have been a huge success. There's tremendous excitement about the fact that they've all been rolled out. Anecdotally, it sounds like there's some issues maybe we still need to work out. That I'll just put out there. Some people have turned them off. Some of them are placed right next to the windows. Sometimes the windows have been closed. Sometimes it's possible that people have stopped having kids go outside as much or to eat outside because they believe the HEPA filter is kind of a cure-all. I think all of these things are incredibly understandable responses to the HEPA filters. And we talked about all these things. And I think, Peter, you've tried to communicate very clearly about this, but I think we need to have one more round of please keep them on. If it's really too loud and you have to turn them down, okay, but when you leave the room, don't turn them off. And if you leave the room, turn them back up. And don't put them right next to the windows, right? The same thing with the open windows in the units and the short cycling the outside air. Yes, it's getting colder, but we're incredibly fortunate with the weather that we've had with like a high of like 40 every day. I can't believe the luck we've had with the weather this year. I'm knocking on wood as I say that. So we could just double down on our efforts to get everybody on the same page of like the role of the HEPAs, that would be great. And you referenced in your superintendent's report about the CO2 measurements. So I just wanted to thank you again for that. That is just really bringing the science to this whole endeavor to measure the rate at which kids are literally rebreathing other people's air, particularly with the new, more infectious variants arriving in New York. It's just tremendous that we're doing that, and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'll put together a communication for the faculty and staff on this.
And I just remembered I had another thank you. It's still an old business. I have to say thank you to Olivia for that just incredibly clear explanation after public comment of these like very complex issues. This is a large organization that's highly regulated, and I just thought Olivia did just an incredibly brilliant job of laying out complex issues for the public as to how money flows in and out of this organization. I just really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I agree completely. Are there other topics for old business from our trustees? Andrea? I'm sorry, Andrea, I think your mute is on.
Thank you. So I have two questions. One, just if there's any updates on the outdoor learning in terms of the professional development or in terms of the task force meetings, that I was hoping that maybe you would have convened.
I'll speak to the task force and just apologize. I promise I'm going to do this. We've just been underwater with all kinds of things that you know, and I know you're supportive of that. So we will take care of that. Chris has been working on the PD stuff. I'll let him speak to that.
So I spoke with Yahaira Herrera, who's the outdoor learning, outdoor and environmental education program coordinator at Nassau BOCES. She actually came here last year and presented when we had different choice workshops. She came and she's very accessible. It's through BOCES, it's low cost. The bigger issue, and I'll talk about this at the next board meeting with PD, the issue we're having this year is sub coverage. And, you know, having like a group of teachers pulling them out, getting sub coverage. So I'm just working through some of those logistics. Also timing, and working on the timing to maximize the impact for when teachers will be outdoors more increasingly come, you know, February, end of February, March, where they'll be out more like they were in the fall. So, but that it's really that first issue in the logistics of it. That we're working at, and it's really the same issue I'm having with some of the educational technology PD that we'll work out, and I'll keep you updated on that. I should have more for you on my next update.
Okay, great. And the other question is just the suspension data. I'm hoping that we can see it desegregated by variables like gender and IEP status. And also if we can have some information on the reasons for the suspension. And I was thinking, even if we have, just to make life easy, redacted copies of the letters that were given to parents, because I'm assuming the letter articulates the reason for the suspension. So as long as the names are redacted, that seems like a very easy way to provide the board some information.
Well, we said we were going to start to pull that data together for you at the last meeting. Chris and I really have to. I appreciate you saying that. We also think that there's an opportunity here that if we get the data and we cull it in the right way, that it's actually useful to all of us as to inform our practice. So Chris and I just need to sit and map it out, get it back to the building so they can, if they need to pull out the suspension letters to do it. I don't know if they do or they don't. They will have a common format across the 5 schools to do that.
But I'm also, I agree. I'm also interested in seeing maybe where it's not similar in the schools. Because there are some differences, and I'm curious whether that has to do with some of the wording in the letters. So I guess I understand what you're saying, but I also like to see it in its rawest form too, if possible.
All right. We probably, those are the student records we wouldn't share, probably even redacted.
Right.
We can pull all, we can get all the information. I know exactly what you're looking for.
Okay.
I understand it.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I just want to make sure that the information is not presented in a way where we could directly or indirectly identify a student.
I agree.
We do have to protect the student's privacy.
Sure. Other old business? Sorry, thank you, Andrew. Peter?
I did want to follow up. Trustee Russo had asked at our last meeting about security, the night security. So I said I would get that information for you. On Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we have, there's not somebody at the school, at every school every night. It's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we have a 4 p.m. to midnight shift that roves the district. Unless we have an incident where I actually ask for additional security, it's one roving car.
Can I ask a question, follow-up question on that?
Yeah.
So we have a security guard Monday through Thursday from 4 to 12 at each school?
No, one that roves.
Oh, I thought you said Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
I did. I did, but we have them at night too, during the week.
Right, but it's one car.
Not at every school.
We don't have one person at every school because you made
We do not.
a differentiation on the days, so that's why I wasn't sure.
Okay, I'm sorry. I apologize.
So there's never a security guard that's stationed at each of the schools unless there's some reason between 4 and midnight.
Correct.
It's always the roving. Okay, I thought someone had reported to me that they thought there was a change. So that's all. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other old business?
Oh, I wanted to thank Peter for getting the information about the Milneck contract for the sign language interpreter.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any new business from our trustees?
I had emailed Peter about the how the sports practices are going for the teams that are allowed, for the sports that are allowed for this particular shortened season. No particular team except maybe for one, which I'm more familiar with. But how are practices going? Are schedules for contests been set, and any kind of logistical concerns or policies that have been set?
Yep. Okay. So they started on Monday. All the sports seasons of winter sports. basketball, men's and women's, track, men's and women's, gymnastics, bowling, men's and women's, wrestling. They're practicing Monday through Thursday. On Friday, because the buildings are virtual, we don't have them practicing, but we are having the kids practice on Saturday to compensate for that. All contests for now are going to be virtual. So unless it's a basketball, right? So you'll have an official at one site, an official at a second site, and that's how they will officiate the contest. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but that's how the section committees set it up. We're not traveling right now because unless for the bowling alley, so everything's going to stay on site. A lot of places are not looking to commingle, including us. We don't want to start with commingling students right now. At the middle school, Winter 1 started. Boys basketball, girls volleyball, boys and girls track. Again, they're practicing Monday through Thursday at the high school, Fridays outside at the middle school, or it's virtual. Basketball and volleyball practice at the high school 2 days a week, and other days are outside at the middle school or virtual. We want to keep everybody in one location, so we're not doing bus trips right now. We're not opening the gyms at the elementary school at this time because we want to limit contact. And according to Don and everybody so far, everybody's very happy. Kids are glad to be together. He wanted to specifically say thank you from the coaches to all of you for, making this possible and flexible. So I think it's going to go a long way for our student athletes. As of right now, I know you had asked me about this for spectators. Right now, we're not going to have spectators at the when we start doing contests. If you can't have spectators for NHL, NBA, all this, we're not there yet. So we are going to try to implement video and streaming technology, so folks can watch the games, but they just won't be in the gym to watch them. So it's pretty cool.
So currently, I'm trying to understand. So currently, they're just practicing.
Correct. They have to get a certain number of practices in before they can start competing.
Right, which is typical of any regular season. But then, for example, I'm going to use my track example because that's what I'm most familiar with. They're going to be competing outside?
Outside. And they will be, so if North Shore is competing against Locust Valley, North Shore will be here, Locust Valley will be there. There'll be an official here timing a race. There'll be an official there timing a race. And then there'll be an announcement of a winner of that race, I suppose.
Wow, that's so interesting.
It's clever, right?
Are they wearing masks during practice?
Yes, they are.
Yep.
Yes, it's part of the protocol.
That's what I thought. But the public doesn't know that, so.
Yeah, well, that's a good question to ask. Thank you. And no travel right now. It's exciting. It's really it's giving kids really a much greater sense of normal that is important to them, and camaraderie and wellness. All of it. It's I really appreciate the board's flexibility with this one. This is really terrific.
I thought they put together a really nice program. It also reminded me, at least I don't want to cut you off, but I'm not cutting you off. I'm just screwing in here. It's not a huge priority, but I think the athletic policy committee should, not anytime soon, but at some point we should get together and touch base again and just make sure we're all on the same page.
I'll check in with Don and see when. I don't know if we have another meeting scheduled, but I'll check with Don.
At least before the next potential season starts.
Yeah, which is going to come up fast.
It all comes up very fast. I left my office today at 5:30. It was still just a little bit light. I was encouraged. We're turning a corner. Is there any other new business? Okay, with that, I would like to make a motion for the board to go into executive session to discuss matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of a particular person or corporation.
Second.
Thank you. I think we can, I think we're good. Chris, we'll turn off the streaming.